The Bennington Triangle, Vermont's Unsolved Disappearances. Welcome to Ontario Cold Cases, Canada's true crime podcast. I'm Jay Nicoll, your host and lead investigator at Nicoll Investigations. Each week we dive into the shadows of unsolved mysteries, seeking answers to cases that have lingered far too long in the cold. For this installment of our True Crime Thursday series, we're stepping beyond Ontario's borders to explore a series of vanishings that have puzzled investigators, families, and communities for nearly 80 years. Today we're heading to the Bennington Triangle, a rugged, forested region in southwestern Vermont, where between 1945 and 1950, at least 5 people disappeared under circumstances that defy explanation. We'll examine each disappearance in detail, with a special focus on the investigations that followed. From a seasoned hunter to a college student, a veteran, a young boy, and a camper, these cases span ages and backgrounds, yet share a haunting connection to this enigmatic area. At the heart of our story is Paula Jean Welden, an 18-year-old whose 1946 vanishing became the most infamous of the Triangle's mysteries. So settle in and join me as we venture into the chilling unknowns of the Bennington Triangle. Ontario Cold Cases, Canada's true crime podcast. It's a gripping true crime podcast uncovering unsolved murders, disappearances, and forgotten crimes from Ontario and beyond. Told with deep research, compelling storytelling, and a voice for the victims. Join us today, where every clue could lead to answers, and every case deserves a second look. Introduction to the Bennington Triangle. Let's start by painting a picture of the Bennington Triangle. This isn't a precisely mapped region with clear boundaries. It's a term coined later to describe an area in southwestern Vermont where these strange events unfolded. It centers on Glastenbury Mountain, a 3,747-foot peak in the Green Mountains, and stretches across parts of Bennington, Woodford, Shaftesbury, and Somerset. Roughly 100 square miles of dense forest, steep ravines, and winding trails. Before the disappearances, this area had a rich, if troubled, history. In the 19th century, Glastenbury and Somerset were bustling with logging, charcoal production, and small industries. By the early 20th century, though, the towns have faded into near ghost towns, unincorporated by 1937 as the population dwindled to single digits. The Long Trail, a 272-mile hiking path running the length of Vermont, cuts through this region, drawing adventurers to its wild beauty. But long before settlers arrived, Native American tribes like the Abenaki regarded Glastenbury Mountain with caution. They believed it was a place of spiritual unrest, where the four winds clashed and strange forces dwelled. Legends spoke of enchanted stones that could engulf anything that touched them. Tales of hairy wild men or spirits roaming the woods added to its mystique. By the 1940s, this isolation and folklore set the stage for what was to come. Between 1945 and 1950, at least 5 individuals vanished here, each case marked by exhaustive searches and lingering questions. Today we'll walk through each one, starting with the disappearance that signaled the beginning of this eerie chapter. Detailed accounts of each disappearance. Middie Rivers, November 12, 1945. Our journey begins on November 12, 1945 with Middie Rivers, a 74-year-old hunting guide whose disappearance would quietly kick off the Bennington Triangle saga. Background. Middie Rivers was a lifelong resident of the Bennington area, a wiry man with decades of experience navigating Vermont's wilderness. Known for his quiet demeanor and sharp woodsman skills, he made a living guiding hunters through the thick forests around Glastenbury Mountain. At 74, he was still active, respected for his knowledge of trails, streams, and hidden hollows that outsiders might overlook. The disappearance. On that crisp November day, Rivers was leading a group of 4 hunters from out of state through Bickford Hollow, a wooded area near Glastenbury Mountain. The group was stalking deer, and Rivers, as usual, took the lead, scouting ahead to flush game toward the hunters. Around midday, he moved out of sight, promising to circle back. The hunters, trusting his expertise, continued their pursuit, expecting him to rejoin them soon. Hours passed. By late afternoon, with no sign of Rivers, the group grew uneasy. They called out, fired signal shots, and retraced their steps, but he was gone. Assuming he returned to their base camp near Route 9, they headed back, only to find the camp empty. As dusk fell, they alerted authorities, sparking the first of many searches in the triangle. The investigation. The response was swift. By November 13, a search party of about 300 people assembled, local volunteers, hunters, and woodsmen who knew the area well. On November 15, the effort escalated when soldiers from Fort Devens, Massachusetts joined in, bringing military precision to the operation. For 8 days, they scoured Bickford Hollow, the slopes of Glastenbury Mountain, and nearby streams, covering miles of rugged terrain. Searchers used a grid system, combing the forest shoulder to shoulder in some areas. They checked ravines, hollow logs, and underbrush, aware that Rivers' age might mean he'd suffered a fall or a medical emergency. Aircraft from a nearby airfield conducted flyovers, though the dense canopy limited visibility. The only clue emerged on day 3, a single rifle cartridge, the type Rivers carried for his .30-30 rifle, found near a stream about a mile from where he was last seen. It suggested he'd been in that area, but there were no footprints, no blood, no torn clothing, nothing to indicate what happened next. Investigators interviewed the hunters repeatedly. They confirmed Rivers was in good spirits, sober, and equipped with his rifle, a knife, and basic supplies. There was no evidence of an argument or foul play within the group. Local police considered animal attacks. Bears and mountain lions were present, found no tracks or remains to support this. Theories. Several possibilities emerged. Lost or disoriented. Even an expert like Rivers could have misjudged the trail in the fading light. Yet his intimate knowledge of the area makes this hard to swallow. Accident. A fall into a ravine or a sudden heart attack, common for a man his age, were plausible. The lack of a body after such a thorough search puzzled everyone. Foul play. Could someone have encountered Rivers in the woods? No suspects or motive surfaced, and the hunters were cleared. Supernatural. Locals whispered about the Bennington monster, a creature tied to regional folklore, though officials dismissed this as superstition. The outcome. By November 20th, with winter closing in, the search was called off. Middie Rivers was declared missing, presumed dead. His family, though heartbroken, had no closure, no grave to visit, no answers to hold on to. His case faded from headlines, overshadowed by the vanishings that followed, but it remains a quiet prelude to the Triangle's mysteries. Paula Jean Welden, December 1st, 1946. Next, we come to the case that put the Bennington Triangle on the map. The disappearance of Paula Jean Welden, an 18-year-old college student whose vanishing reshaped Vermont's history. Background. Paula Welden was a sophomore at Bennington College, a liberal arts school known for its progressive ethos. Born in 1928 in Stamford, Connecticut, she was the eldest of 4 daughters in a well-to-do family. Her father, William Archibald Welden, was a prominent industrial engineer, designing products like the Barbie doll's dream house years later. Paula was bright, artistic, and independent, with a love for painting and a restless streak that sometimes clashed with her structured upbringing. At Bennington, she thrived among creative peers, but was known to take solitary walks to clear her mind. On December 1st, 1946, cold Sunday with temperatures hovering in the 30s, that restlessness led her to the long trail. The disappearance. Paula's day began routinely. She worked her morning and afternoon shifts at the college dining hall, earning extra cash as many students did. Around 2:30 p.m., she told her roommate, Elizabeth Parker, she She was going for a walk to shake off exam stress. Dressed in a bright red parka with fur-trimmed hood, blue jeans, white topsider sneakers, and a gold Elgin wristwatch with a black band, she left her dorm at 2:45 p.m. She didn't go unnoticed. At a gas station near campus, employee Louis Knapp saw her hitchhiking and gave her a ride to Route 9, dropping her near the Long Trail's entrance around 3 o'clock p.m. A store clerk in Bennington later recalled giving her directions to the trailhead. Around 3:45 p.m., an elderly couple, Marion and Ernest Whitman, spotted her hiking the Long Trail about 100 yards ahead. They saw her round a bend, and then she was gone. At 4 o'clock p.m., Fred Gaudette, a lumberjack and watchman in a lumber camp at Harbor Road, saw her walking toward Glastenbury Mountain, roughly 2 miles from the trailhead. That was the last confirmed sighting. When Paula didn't return by 7 o'clock p.m., Elizabeth alerted college officials. Assuming she might have stayed with friends, they waited until morning to act. The investigation. On December 2nd, the search began in earnest. Bennington College President Lewis Webster Jones rallied students, faculty, and staff, while local police and volunteers joined in. By midweek, the effort swelled to over 1,000 people. National Guard troops, firefighters, loggers, and even Boy Scouts. The search spanned the Long Trail, Glastenbury Mountain slopes, and 10-mile radius around her last sighting, using foot patrols, horses, and aircraft from Floyd Bennett Field in New York. The operation was chaotic. Vermont had no state police force in 1946, so Sheriff Clyde Peck and Bennington County State's Attorney George Aiken coordinated efforts with limited resources. Volunteers trampled potential evidence, and jurisdictional disputes hampered progress. Searchers found nothing. No scraps of her red parka, no footprints in the frozen ground, no signs of a struggle. Witness interviews offered conflicting leads. The Whitmans were certain of their timing, placing Paul on the trail at 3:45 p.m. Fred Gaudette's account was less reliable. Initially, he claimed he'd seen her, then said he might have been mistaken, and later boasted to friends he knew where she was buried, only to retract it as drunken bravado. Police hauled him in for questioning in December 1946, and again in 1952, after new tips, but found no evidence tying him to the case. Paula's father arrived on December 3rd, furious at the disorganized response. He hired private investigators, offered a $5,000 reward, about $70,000 today, and pressured authorities. His frustration boiled over in a press conference, where he accused locals of hiding something and criticized Vermont's lack of state police force. Theories drove the investigation in multiple directions. Lost in the woods, searchers checked caves, cliffs, and streams, but the scale of the effort, over 600 square miles by week's end, made survival unlikely without a trace. Foul play. Gaudette and a local man, Carl Cosma, who'd acted suspiciously, were scrutinized. Cosma's alibi held, and Gaudette's stories never panned out. No physical evidence of violence emerged. Runaway. William Welden suggested Paula might have fled family pressures, but her friends insisted she was happy at school. No bank activity or sighting supported this. By December 15, with snow blanketing the area, the official search ended, though smaller efforts continued into 1947. In 1955, a lumberjack reported finding human bones near Route 9, but tests were inconclusive, possibly animal remains. Theories: hypothermia or accident. The simplest explanation. Paula got lost, fell or froze. Falters against the lack of remains after such a massive search. Murder. Suspicion lingered on Gaudette, but no proof surfaced. Other locals were cleared over time. Voluntary disappearance. Unlikely given her lack of resources and the harsh conditions. Supernatural. The Triangle's folklore fueled tales of alien abductions or portals, though these were scoffed at by investigators. Impact and outcome. Paula's case reverberated far beyond Vermont. Her father's advocacy led to the Vermont State Police creation in July 1947, a direct response to the investigation's failures. The mystery-inspired Shirley Jackson's 1951 novel, Hangs a Man, and influenced Donna Tartt's The Secret History. Paula was declared legally dead in 1953, but her family never stopped hoping. Her vanishing remains Vermont's most famous cold case, a symbol of the Triangle's enduring enigma. James Tedford, December 1st, 1949. 3 years to the day after Paula's disappearance, on December 1st, 1949, the Triangle struck again, this time in a way that defies logic. Meet James Tedford, a 68-year-old veteran whose vanishing from a moving bus is one of the strangest cases on record. The background. James Edward Tedford was a World War I veteran from Underhill, Vermont. By 1949, he lived at the Bennington Soldiers' Home, a residence for elderly or struggling vets. Described as quiet and unassuming, he'd been married, but his wife Pearl had left him years earlier, possibly during his service. On November 28, 1949, he traveled to St. Albans to visit relatives, including a cousin, for the Thanksgiving holiday. The disappearance. Tedford boarded a Greyhound bus in St. Albans on December 1st, around 2:00 p.m., bound for Bennington, a 120-mile trip with stops in Burlington and Manchester. At Burlington, 40 miles in, he transferred buses and was seen by passengers settling into a seat near the back, carrying a small suitcase and a bus timetable. The driver, Robert Goodrich, later confirmed Tedford was aboard of the Manchester stop, 30 miles from Bennington, around 7:00 p.m. The bus rolled through the dark with no scheduled stops until Bennington. At 7:45 p.m., it pulled into the Bennington depot. Passengers disembarked, but Tedford wasn't among them. A suitcase sat in the overhead rack, his timetable open on the seat, yet he was gone. The investigation. Bennington police were notified that night by the Soldiers' Home, where Tedford was expected. Goodrich and 14 passengers were interviewed. All swore Tedford hadn't left at Manchester, and the route offered no stops or opportunities to slip off unnoticed. The driver insisted he'd have seen anyone exit mid-trip as the bus was well lit, and he checked the rear view off him. Investigators searched the bus for clues, blood, a weapon, anything, but found only Tedford's belongings, undisturbed. They scoured the route from Manchester to Bennington, a 30-mile stretch of Route 7 on foot and by car, checking ditches, woods, and side roads. Nothing turned up. On December 3rd, a tip came from Brandon, 70 miles north. A man matching Tedford's description, gray coat, slight limp, being seen acting confused at a diner. Police chased the lead, but the timeline didn't fit. Tedford couldn't have backtracked that far without transport. His relatives confirmed he'd seemed despondent about returning to the home, hinting at mental strain, but he'd given no signs of plans to flee. The investigation stalled by mid-December. No witnesses saw him after Manchester, and no body was found along the route. Theories. Voluntary exit. Did Tedford, distressed, somehow leave the bus unnoticed? Passengers and the driver disputed this. He had no money for alternate travel. Mental breakdown. Confusion or amnesia might explain it, but how he vanished mid-trip baffles experts. Foul play. A robbery or assault seems unlikely. No struggle was reported, and his luggage remained. Supernatural. The date, exactly 3 years after Welden, and the bus mystery filled tales of the Triangle's curse. The outcome? James Tedford was never found. His case, with its locked room-like quality, stands out as the most bizarre of the Triangle disappearances, a puzzle that investigators couldn't crack. Paul Jepson, October 12, 1950. Less than a year later, on October 12, 1950, the Triangle claimed its youngest victim, 8-year-old Paul Jepson, a boy whose disappearance shattered a small community. Background: Paul, nicknamed Buddy, lived with his parents, Walter and Gertrude Jepson, of North Bennington. The family was working class. Walter was a handyman and Gertrude raised pigs at the town dump, a common side job. Paul had developmental disabilities. Details are scarce, but he was described as easily distracted and prone to wandering. At 8, he was small for his age, with light brown hair, often wearing a red jacket or tan coveralls that blended with the fall landscape. The disappearance. That Thursday, Gertrude took Paul along to feed the pigs at the dump, a mile from home off Route 67A. Around 3:30 p.m., she left in the family's red truck, parked near a shed, while she worked 100 yards away. She'd done this before. Paul usually stayed put, playing or napping. At 4 o'clock p.m., she returned less than 30 minutes later and found the truck empty. Gertrude searched the dump, calling his name, then drove home, hoping he'd walk back. When Walter confirmed Paul wasn't there, they called police at 4:30 p.m. The investigation. Bennington County Sheriff Robert Wilson launched a search that evening, starting with 50 locals and state troopers from the newly formed Vermont State Police. By October 13, it grew to 300, police, firefighters, hunters, and residents, covering the dump, nearby woods, and Glastenbury Mountain's base, 5 miles away. On October 14, bloodhounds from New York State Police arrived. Starting at the truck, they tracked Paul's scent halfway a mile to an intersection on Route 67A, near where Paula Welden was last seen, before the trail vanished. Rain the previous night might have washed it away, or some speculated a vehicle picked him up there. Searchers used megaphones, signal flares, and aircraft from Rutland Airport, focusing on the lawn trail and wooded areas Paul's father said he'd been fascinated by. Walter noted Paul's recent obsession with going to the mountains, adding a chilling layer to the case. No clues surfaced. No jacket. No footprints. No witnesses beyond Gertrude. On October 15, police questioned truck drivers at the dump. All were cleared. A psychic from New Jersey, contacted by the family, claimed Paul was alive in a cave, but searches of local caves found nothing. By October 20, with no leads and colder weather setting in, the effort scaled back, though volunteers persisted into November. Theories. Abduction. The scent ending at a road suggested a motorist took him, intentionally or after an accident. No ransom or sightings followed. Lost. Paul might have wandered off, drawn by the mountains, and succumbed to exposure. His disabilities could explain his silence. The search's scope challenges this. Accident. Walter theorized a truck hit Paul, and the driver hit the body. No evidence supported this. Outcome. Paul Jepson was never found. His parents lived with guilt and grief. Their simple outing turned into a nightmare that remains unsolved. Frieda Langer, October 28, 1950. Just 16 days after Paul's disappearance, on October 28, 1950, the Triangle's final known victim vanished. Frieda Langer, a 53-year-old whose case offers a rare if incomplete resolution. Background. Frieda Langer lived in North Adams, Massachusetts, with her husband Max. A sturdy, outdoorsy woman, she loved camping and hiking with her family. On October 28, she joined her cousin Herbert Elsner, his wife, and others for a weekend at a campsite near Somerset Reservoir, a remote spot 10 miles from Bennington. The disappearance. Around 3 o'clock p.m., Frieda and Herbert set out on a short hike along a logging trail near the reservoir. A quarter mile from camp, Frieda slipped into a shallow stream, soaking her clothes. At 53, she wasn't keen on catching a chill, so she told Herbert to wait while she returned to change, about 400 yards back, a 10-minute walk. Herbert agreed, resting on a log. By 3:30 p.m., when Frieda didn't return, Herbert walked back to the camp. She wasn't there. The family searched nearby, then called police at 4 o'clock p.m. The investigation. Vermont State Police and Bennington Sheriff's deputies arrived by 5 p.m., launching a search with 50 volunteers. By October 29, it ballooned to 400. Police, National Guard, firefighters, and locals, covering a 5-mile radius around the campsite. Aircraft from Pittsfield, Massachusetts, scanned the reservoir and woods while divers checked the water, suspecting she'd fallen in. For 2 weeks, they found nothing. No footprints, no scraps of her gray jacket or blue jeans. The terrain was swampy with ponds and streams that complicated efforts. On November 11, the official search ended, though family and friends continued. On May 12, 1951, a breakthrough. Fishermen found a woman's body in the east branch of the Deerfield River, 3.5 miles from the campsite near an open field off Somerset Road. Dental records confirmed it was Frieda. Oddly, this area had been searched in October, though less thoroughly due to its distance. The autopsy was inconclusive. Decomposition after nearly 7 months left no clear cause of death. No fractures or wounds were noted, though soft tissue evidence was gone. Her clothes were intact, ruling out animal scavenging. Theories. Accident. Frieda might have fallen into a pond, drowned, and been carried by spring runoff to the river. The initial search missing her body suggests it moved later. Lost. Disoriented after the fall, she could have wandered off and died of exposure. The body's location challenges this timeline. Foul play. Unlikely given no signs of violence in her proximity to family. The outcome? Frieda's body provided closure, but not answers. Her death certificate lists unknown causes, making her case the triangle's only recovery and its final mystery. Up next, patterns and common theories. Patterns and common theories. Let's step back and look for connections. These 5 cases, Middie Rivers, Paula Welden, James Tedford, Paul Jepson, and Frieda Langer, span 1945 to 1950, all tied to the Bennington Triangle. Most occurred in late fall or early winter, when the woods were bare and temperatures dropped. 4 involved outdoor activities, hunting, hiking, camping, near Glastenbury Mountain or the Long Trail. Tedford's bus vanishing stands apart, yet its timing and location link it to the pattern. Victims ranged from an 8-year-old boy to a 74-year-old man, crossing genders and backgrounds. Several wore bright clothing, Paula's red parka, Paul's red jacket, yet vanished without a trace. Searches, often massive, found little. A cartridge for Rivers, a body for Langer, nothing for the rest. Investigative challenges recur. No state police until 1947. Initial disorganization in a landscape that hid evidence. Bloodhounds lost scents, aircraft saw nothing through the trees, and witnesses offered slim leads. Theories fall into a few camps. Natural causes. Exposure, falls, or disorientation fit most cases. The triangle's steep cliffs, swamps, and southern weather support this, yet the lack of remains, except Langer's, defies logic. Human factors. Abduction or murder surface in Welden's and Jepson's cases, but no suspect stuck. Tedford's case resists this entirely. Supernatural. Triangle's folklore, cursed stones, wild men, UFOs, gained traction, especially with Tedford. No evidence backs this, but the clustering fuels speculation. Could geography explain it? Glastenbury's rocky forest expanse could conceal bodies indefinitely. Still, the concentration of cases in 5 years suggests something more, chance, or something we can't yet grasp. Impact and legacy. The Bennington Triangle left scars in Vermont and beyond. Paula Welden's case birthed the Vermont State Police, a practical legacy from tragedy Locally, it shifted how searches were run, more coordinated, less chaotic. Culturally, the mysteries endure. Books, films, and podcasts like ours keep them alive. Glastenbury's ghost towns and eerie reputation draw hikers and paranormal buffs, some reporting odd lights or sounds, echoes of the old tales. For the families, the impact was personal. The Rivers, Weldens, Jepsons, and Langers lived with loss. Only the Langers buried their loved one. These cases remind us how quickly life can turn to mystery in the wild. As we close this chapter, the Bennington Triangle remains a riddle wrapped in forest and fog. 5 lives slipped away, leaving trails that end in silence. Were they claimed by nature, a hidden hand, or something stranger? We may never know. If these stories stir a memory or a clue, reach out to Vermont State Police or leave a comment. Every cold case waits for that one spark to reignite it. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. Stay curious, stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Because every case deserves answers, and every victim deserves justice. Subscribe now to Ontario Cold Cases, Canada's True Crime Podcast. Episodes available wherever you get your podcasts.